We are, of course, all part of organizations. At every level of our involvement in society, from the moment we are born till the moment we die, we will be part of some sort of institution. Whether that is the nation state, we're all part of a nation somewhere, whether it is our school, whether it is the university where we go, whether it is the bank where we bank, or the political party which we vote for or against. We are forever in these kinds of organizations, and these organizations often have got complex hierarchies, difficult political structures, political intrigue, friction, interpersonal intrigue that impact us, that influence our affluence, that influence our status, whether we are eligible for promotion or not, what positions we gain access to, and how easily we are able to function within that group. These are all realities that we face in any of these kinds of organizations, right? And what is not that well known, I think, is that all of these institutions have got spirits or angels set over them. Intelligences, you could say, that govern, that pattern, that structure that organization, that are the administrators, you could say, of those organizations. These beings exist on the largest scale for nation states, up and down to the smallest possible bodies, whether it is your church, whether it is your magical order or your witches' coven, or whether it is your professional association. There will be this spirit that is set over that is working there, whether you are aware of it or not. In rabbinic sources, it's said that there is an angel set over the smallest blade of grass. Even a blade of grass has got an intelligence governing it. During the magical revival, for me, it feels like a function of post-Enlightenment thinking. The notion of the egregore became quite popular, and this is the same thing, really. The egregore is kind of the idea that a group kind of creates a thought form, a living thought form that is a result of the communal consciousness of those participating in the group. And to my way of thinking, that is a slightly more cynical or impoverished view. It somehow suggests that human beings can create a spirit, and I find it far more likely, from my point of view, which is really rooted in a more classical worldview, which is to say that things emanate from the divine realm, that there is a kind of an order of emanation from the greatest to the smallest. And in each order of that, there are these intelligences, there are these beings that are set over things to govern things. For example, a cynical way of looking at the human being is to say that that our souls are a product of our body. And this is, of course, called the hard problem, the notion of how is consciousness created? How can consciousness arise from dead matter? And this has not been resolved by philosophy or by science. A far more parsimonious and, in fact, rational explanation is that complex systems, organisms arise from spirit or arise from consciousness. And in the same way, to my way of thinking, this is also true for organizations. This is also true for institutions. First, there is the intelligence, the governing intelligence, the angel, and then as a result of that patterning principle, the whole organization is kind of structured around that and formed, right? But this is a bit of metaphysical hair splitting, whether you think of it as an egregore or a thought form, or whether you think of it as an existing spirit that was created by God to govern that institution. The practical implications are exactly the same. Basically, it means that there is, for the magician, this intelligent spirit available there to conjure, to communicate with, to propitiate, and of course to learn from. Now, if you give it some thought, you will soon see how helpful this could potentially be. For example, you're about to apply for tenure as a faculty member. You will find that by propitiating contact and working with the spirit of the university, your chances of success will be greatly increased. And I often encourage clients who are part of competitive corporate environments to contact and begin propitiating the spirit of the corporation or the business where they are working. And what they will find is if they establish a relationship with their spirit, if they start making offerings to the spirit, if they start consciously communicating with the spirit, unsurprisingly, things start going more smoothly. Superiors begin favoring them. The politics within the organization functions in such a way that it begins supporting you rather than working against you. You might find that your relationships with your associates or your colleagues is much smoother. You might find that you get promotions more easily. You might find that you are favored by superiors more easily. But whatever the case may be, propitiating the spirit as an ally is a powerful tool in your toolbox. And so you might say, well, how do I go about doing this? And there are a couple of ways. The first thing that I would suggest is to create a sigil for the spirit. And the easiest and the most well-known, of course, is to use the monogram sigil method that was popularized by the chaos magic current in the late 80s and 90s, right? And if you Google chaos magic or sigil, you'll find a lot of tutorial videos on this. So I'm not going to repeat myself too much, but briefly, you take the letters of the name of that organization and you create a monogram. And this monogram then becomes the magical call card, the sigil that you will use to contact or to align yourself with the consciousness of that being. That's the first way. There are other more complex ways using numerology, using Kabbalistic number squares and so on that you might want to look into. And if this is a topic of interest for you, I might make a video later on showing a couple of different traditional techniques for generating sigils for different spiritual intelligences. But my suggestion is to work with a sigil, a monogram sigil. It's perfectly serviceable, right? And in fact, the use of the monogram sigil to contact a spirit was the original form of that sigil before it became popularized by the chaos magic current as a kind of way of crystallizing your intention, making a symbol for your desire. The method can be found in the 3 books of occult philosophy by Cornelius Agrippa, and in fact there's an example given there for making a sigil for the Archangel Michael, just taking the letters of the Latin Roman alphabet and forming a monogram. You might then create a layman and then proceed to conjure the spirit within the system that you're most comfortable with, whether that is to conjure it into a triangle or to conjure it into a crystal. There are many very different ways, and begin to communicate with it, find out what it would like as an offering, find out what it has to teach you, because this can be very important. They often have a lot of helpful information that will help you get some inside advantage within the organization. And especially if you're a well-developed clairvoyant, you will find that line of exploration most useful, because naturally you will need to be able to hear them or see them spiritually in order to communicate with them. Having said that, even if you're not a brilliant clairvoyant, the process of evoking that being and being around it, feeling its presence around the circle or in the crystal, will already create a powerful attunement effect for the magician. And you may not speak with it, or you may not hear it speaking to you, but the energetic attunement effect will already have a positive impact on your functioning with the organization. I'm pretty sure you will see things flowing more smoothly in that institution, and you will start having intuitive hits. You'll start feeling more comfortable within that space from doing that alone, whether you can clairvoyantly communicate or not. Of course, if you can, then you are free to communicate with the spirit, ask it questions, how you might find promotion or how to overcome certain conflicts. You might ask it what it wants, because these organizations all want something. And if you find out what it wants, you can of course give it that, whether it's in the spiritist sense of an offering. It might want some alcohol, it might want some food, or you can find out what kind of work it wants for you to do within the organization, right? Whatever the case may be, this will allow you then to fall into its favor and find some experience within that group. And I often will recommend creating a sigil for an organization if a client is, for example, seeking to sweeten themselves to an institution and they don't have the name of an individual, be it say for instance you're going for a job interview and you don't know who will be interviewing you. You don't have the name of the person or the panel of people who will be interviewing you. You just know that you're going to see this organization, right? Then it might be a good idea to sweeten that's the spirit of that organization, to create a sigil for that organization and create a honey jar and put the sigil of that spirit in the honey jar and sweeten the spirit to you. Communicate with that spirit also. You can offer it candles and so on. And taking a 7-day candle or vigil, inscribing the sigil on that, and then writing a petition to that spirit along with some offering is another very simple way that you could work with the spirit of an institution without having to do a formal evocation. But there's another option available to you also. If you are someone who is more comfortable working in a visionary way, whether that is through path working, there are many systems of path working, traditional ceremonial styles, and then there are other kinds of more shamanistic path workings that use drumming and so forth. There you might, for example, then use the sigil to contact the spirit, but in a visionary way, where you first enter into a trance or a kind of ecstatic reverie, and then send your soul forth on the astral and into this realm, and to communicate and contact the spirit there and to parley with it. Often there will be interesting visionary encounters that you will experience with that sort of spirit. It will often teach you through allegories. Whatever the case may be, whether you choose to work it ceremonially, whether you choose to work it in a more folk magical style with just a candle, the name, and a sigil, or you want to work with it in a more shamanic way, consider the power of the spirits of an organization, and begin experimenting with this, and let me know how this works for you. I found this to be quite an interesting and helpful thing. And of course, while working with it positively makes a lot of sense. If this is an organization where you want to find some benefit, you want it to favor you in some way, that's a logical way. But you can also work with this in a negative way. For example, with a political party, if there is a political party that you would like to have its influence lessened, this is something that is quite relevant today with all these political parties that are rising up that are very extreme, and you instead want to diminish the influence of these parties. It might be a good idea to conjuring the spirit of a party and binding it, or otherwise finding ways to placate it or befriend it or soothe it so that it is less corrosive, so that it is less destructive. whatever the case may be, that should give you some food for thought, how you could work with the spirit of a hostile group, whether that's a political party or an opposing sports team, or the spirit of another organization, whether it's a coven or a magical order that somehow is working against your interests. So there you have it. That's what I have to say about working with the spirit of an organization. Let me know what you think about this. If you decide to work with this technique, feel free to comment down below and say how it worked for you. If you found this interesting and useful, remember to like or to subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.